Remember in those post-referendum heydays when people are asking questions, now we're no longer in the EU. What about all those funds that we used to get from the EU? Because here's the thing. Because of austerity, a lot of councils had to rely massively so on these funds from the EU in order to be able to run basic public services and even provide some basic investment into the local area. And of course, the Brexiteers were like, don't worry, don't worry. We're going to change these, quote, terrible EU ways that you have to apply for this money and do all this stuff. And thus was born, or at least that was the beginning, shall we say, of the ideas of what would eventually become levelling up. And of course, part of that, the UK Shared Prosperity Fund that we were all going to be sharing and be a part of. And of course, this is where we come to talking about on what happened with levelling up. The big central pillar, of course, that everyone said got Boris Johnson elected. It was Brexit and then levelling up. That's what got him elected. So what happened with levelling up? Effectively, nothing. Don't get me wrong, there was stuff announced. You got the Shared Prosperity Fund, you got other minuscule key things, but there were questions raised about it because this was meant to be the streamlined version of the compared to the EU version. It was going to be far more better. Councils would get their money really easily. And of course, what happened? Well, initially, the Shared Prosperity Fund has now seen councils have to fight each other for funds that they all really desperately need because that's how it was set out. We've seen funds specifically go to pork barrel politics, meaning that it went to the Conservative areas, not the Labour areas. And it has been well and truly an absolute mess. And now, here's the fun part. Here's the fun part. This morning, we have now found out, due to a Freedom of Information request, that almost all UK councils have not spent their share of levelling up funds. 95% of councils have not spent their levelling up money. And if you work in a local council and you know that you've got money left over, you know what happens to that money. It goes back to Whitehall. You don't get to keep it. Meaning that if you had a levelling up project or something that you wanted to do, you've got to reapply for it again. You've got to go through all the rigmarole of trying to get that again. And then this raises the prospect of, what if you apply again and let's say this time you don't get the money? This is really truly a nightmare of what has happened here. And remember, levelling up was meant to be a big key proponent of the Conservatives. Oh yes, we're going to level everything up. It's going to be absolutely fantastic. It's going to be amazing. Hasn't happened. People have very, 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 very noticed this, especially in the north, because this was the area that it was going to be done in. We were going to level up the north. It was going to be great. It was going to be fantastic. And of course, remember they were leveling up white paper. The first 2 chapters, unbelievable, pointing out exactly what has been wrong. The fact, the lack of an industrial strategy, the lack of investment, the lack of sort of focus of the government of doing this. And then, of course, we get to the Treasury section, which Rishi Sunak was in charge of at the time, just not even giving the money that was asked for in the first 2 chapters. And now we find out this. So before we go more into this, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below there are links to my Patreon page and a one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. And of course, there is the YouTube thank you button, and of course, the Pony Club down below as well. So this is what is really shocking about this. So the Freedom of Information Act revealed that 95% of local authorities that received funding in 2022 to 2023 were unable to spend all of their share. And across the UK, 43% of the £429 million in funding was not spent. Not a single council in the north of England, Scotland, or Wales spent its full investment. So this raises huge questions over this whole, shared prosperity fund, about what it was doing and how it was acting. So the guy who ran this, a guy called Jack Shaw, who is a researcher of the Bennett Institute for Public Policy at Cambridge University, who did all this. This is what he said were the biggest reasons that these authorities weren't able to spend this money. So he said that the main reasons were they were able to spend the allocations in 2022 and 2023 was because the government gave them less than 2 months instead of 12 months. Yeah, you've got 2 months, spend all this money, go, go, go. Shaw also warned that there were significant underspends were likely to be at the end of the program, and that this money could not be recouped and would be allocated elsewhere across Whitehall, saying that the issue is not the size of the funding of the pot per se, but the rules attached to it and the failure to get it out on time. He said authorities will now have to spend nearly 3 times more than they were able to allocate in 2022 to 2023, which now raises questions about their capacity and their capability to do so, given the reductions around staffing in recent years. He said it is clear whoever wins the next election will need to prioritize public services and, in particular, rebuild local capacity. And what does that mean, rebuilding local capacity? It means basically the councils need to hire more people. It needs to hire more people to be able to do these things. But remember, we have a government that continuously says that, oh yes, we're a small C government. No, we want smaller government, not bigger government. Well, this is what happens when you have a small government and you give them this amount of money. Turns out they can't actually spend it all on product on stuff that they need. And if they don't spend it all because of the rules, goes back to Whitehall, gets spent on different things. So if they come back and say, hey, where's the rest of that money? The guys in Whitehall go, what money? You didn't spend all that. It just goes to show you what an absolute mess this really was. And this is something that Labour really need to sort out. They need to sort out especially the funding allocation, get rid of a lot of this paperwork, and really make sure that it gets to local people. In fact, why not just say all this money just goes to local councils in the first place? It recrease their funding so that local councils can do the jobs that they need to do. Give them more power. We've seen the regional mayors do a lot of great work. We've seen, of course, Andy Burnham taking bus routes back into control in Manchester. That is apparently having a really good effect on public transport in the Manchester area. We are seeing other Labour mayors, and I want to point out Labour mayors in particular, do this as well. Because it's proving to be an actual good policy that people want and vote for. So maybe, of course, this says maybe you want to build some kind of, big infrastructure project which links cities in and around the area. I don't know, might have been a good idea, that whole HS2 thing. This continues to be an absolute nightmare of a government that has no idea what it is doing. But of course, hopefully, we'll have an election soon and be able to get rid of them, and at least get more competent people in power. Because if anything, um, Brexit showed, and this recent couple of years have shown, the Conservatives do not have anyone worth their salt being in power, considering, of course, what we've seen recently being written by Nadine Dorris. Um, yeah, how on earth she got to be a minister should raise a lot of questions, certainly. But as always, thank you very much for watching, and of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.